Well, the calls are getting louder for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of Canada to step down, resign in the wake of a few scandals that are unfolding. Of course, a Nazi brought before Parliament, applauded, giving standing ovations. Then the fall guy, Speaker of the House of Commons, resigning yesterday, taking full responsibility for it. But we've been able to, I think, see through all of that charade. And then word that the Prime Minister's aircraft, cocaine found on board, reports of cocaine found on board. The Prime Minister's office denying it, but why was the plane grounded for 2 days in India? The Toronto Sun reporting this, among other sources on this. And moments ago, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau came out with what I think he would call an apology, but really seems like a half-hearted apology, throwing his Speaker of the House of Commons completely under the bus.
Canadians, in front of Jewish people here and around the world, and Ukrainians, to offer Parliament's unreserved apologies for what happened on Friday. The Speaker was solely responsible for the invitation and recognition of this man, and has wholly accepted that responsibility and stepped down.
So all of these calls for Justin Trudeau to step aside in the wake of these most recent scandals, will that happen? Let's ask David Krayden from Krayden's Right and a writer at the Post Millennial. Joins us from Canada, from Ottawa. David, good to see you.
Always good to be back, Clayton. Thank you.
So last night, also, we should mention there was an emergency cabinet meeting, I guess maybe around midnight last night. We don't know the full details of this. I know you're just getting word on this. I don't know if do you think it may has anything to do with either the cocaine story or the Nazi story in the House of in Parliament, or maybe totally unrelated to this?
I think it has everything to do with the cocaine story and the Nazi story. The story of this former Waffen-SS member coming to Parliament has just continues to explode around the world. And it's an embarrassment that Trudeau has deliberately sidestepped the last 2 days in question period, where the Prime Minister is supposed to be there front and center representing the government, answering the questions of the opposition. He has skipped Monday and Tuesday, and he has put his House leader there up front, who is a pregnant woman, by the way, typical of Trudeau, to hide behind somebody else. So he puts a pregnant woman up there to take all of the abuse from the opposition, asking these questions about, where is Justin Trudeau? Why is he not responding to this? And she's reading her script, of course, about how, we're all very embarrassed about this, and it's really quite a horrible thing. And she is doing a horrible job, of course. But Justin Trudeau is finding any excuse not to come to the House of Commons. And yesterday, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre said, well, at least I show up for work. You can call me irresponsible if you want for bringing up these issues about how the Prime Minister obviously knew about this former Nazi coming to the House of Commons, coming to Parliament. But Justin Trudeau doesn't even show up for work. And I do believe that he is under intense pressure from his caucus and from his cabinet to resign, even though, unfortunately, Pierre Poilievre has not called for the Prime Minister to resign. Maybe he will today, but he has not in the House of Commons for the past 2 days. He has simply said the Prime Minister needs to apologize. And unfortunately, Poilievre has emphasized that apology far too much to Zelensky and Ukraine than he has to Canadians and Canadian vets. I've been very, very disappointed in how he has pushed this message, and I think entirely the wrong way. But yes, Justin Trudeau does need to apologize. He does need to come clean on this. And well, I've been saying he should resign for a long time, not just for these issues, but because the country is in tatters.
Well, he did come out in front of the camera, even though he didn't show up on the floor of Parliament. He did release a video where he blamed what happened in Parliament by bringing a Nazi out there and getting a standing ovation. He blamed that on Russian propaganda. Let's play this soundbite and get you to respond.
Obviously, it's extremely upsetting that this happened. The speaker has acknowledged his mistake and has apologized. But this is something that is deeply embarrassing to the Parliament of Canada and, by extension, to all Canadians. I think particularly of Jewish MPs and all members of the Jewish community across the country who are commemorating Yom Kippur today. I think it's going to be really important that all of us push back against Russian propaganda, Russian disinformation, and continue our steadfast and unequivocal support for Ukraine, as we did last week with announcing further measures to stand with Ukraine in Russia's illegal war against it.
So, David, it was Russian propaganda. It was the fault of Putin that they brought a Nazi on the floor of Parliament. Yeah,
I mean, this is just so laughable. And on two fronts, really, because clearly there was a Speaker of the House, Anthony Rota, a member of Parliament from the North Bay area of Ontario, who obviously didn't grow up watching Hogan's Heroes. He didn't even seem to know that the Allies were fighting on the same side as Russia during the Second World War. We weren't fighting Russia. In fact, we've actually never been fighting Russia in the last 70 years. So I don't know where this came from, why the Speaker was so ignorant about Canadian history. But that's not Russian disinformation. That's unfortunately a failure of our education system and a failure of something else with Mr. Rota. I don't understand why he didn't know that. But what's really disturbing is that the House Leader, on the first day that Pierre Poilievre brought up this whole issue about why did this happen? Why is the Prime Minister not taking responsibility? She actually suggested that the entire event, everything, including what Rota said about this Waffen-SS member being a Canadian hero, that all of this, including the documentation that every member of Parliament rose from their seat and applauded this man, giving him a standing ovation, that all of this be erased from the historical parliamentary record. This is mind-boggling, because if anybody who has read 1984 knows, the lead character in that book, that's his job. He goes back and he excises, redacts, as you're censors historical moments to make them jive with the current policy of the government, or anything that would be embarrassing that happened last week that would be embarrassing for the government today. And that's what she asked to do. And she wanted unanimous consent from the House of Commons, which only happens when there's an issue of huge principle that every MP can agree on. She asked for that and didn't get it. Thank God the Conservatives said, no, we're not going to do this because this sounds like the Soviet Union or Nazi Germany. In fact, what they quoted George Santayana, who said, those who forget the past are condemned to repeat it. Yeah, clearly. And this is mind-boggling and frightening that we have a Trudeau government that wants to excise the past because it embarrasses them today.
So this Nazi, 98 years old, now the Polish government making moves to want to extradite him to Poland. I mean, presumably to stand, trial for war crimes. And the worst of the worst, the Waffen-SS. So will the Canadian government go along with this extradition? He's been outed now. I mean, they hunt people down like this. They hunt people down like this for years. People make it their mission to find these types of Nazis, and the Trudeau government basically outed him for it.
Yeah. It's interesting, Clayton, because, of course, you brought up this very issue the last time we spoke. You said, do you think there will be potential prosecution of this man? I said, well, I don't know. Literally 24 hours later comes a letter from the government of Poland saying, we want this man, because they believe he participated in war crimes in Poland, and specifically in the massacre of a village of Polish Jews. Now, will the Canadian government extradite him? This is always a sticky process, whether it's Canada or the U.S. or any democratic country in Europe where a war criminal is believed to be living, and to extradite him to the country where he is potentially going to be tried. It's always a difficult process. It takes sometimes years. Will he die in the process? But I really want to know and wonder, will the Canadian government even want to cooperate because of the potential embarrassment? Not only in terms of why this guy was living in a safe haven of Canada all of these years, but why did all these Waffen-SS, ex-Waffen-SS soldiers enter Canada in the 1950s to begin with? Why were they given, apparently, new lives in Canada, allowed to live unmolested by the law? Nobody asked any serious questions. And can you tell me why Anthony Rota, the former speaker, obviously knew this man for years? He didn't just meet him last week. He must have known him for years. And there must be others in that community who are perhaps involved and were involved in the same unit during the war, or others like it. Is this going to be an explosive story? I think there's a back channel story here that hasn't even been examined. I'd like to do it myself, actually, but I am curious how willing the Canadian government is going to be to actually extradite this man. I would say, like you, yes, he should be.
He should be, yeah.
He should be, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe he should be. And this would be a way for Canada to save face and say we made a huge mistake. He should stand trial for war crimes. We're going to extradite him back to Poland. They're asking for it. We understand that he was involved in this massacre of this village of Poles during World War II. And we were pleading ignorance before, but now we've seen the light. Let's send him off to Poland. And of course, Poland is having to walk a real delicate balance here, because on the one hand, they're totally supporting Ukraine and very much anti-Russia at this stage, while at the same time asking for a Nazi who is standing there with Zelensky. So it's a very delicate, very bizarre. I'm sure there's a back channel, some sort of back channel diplomacy happening that we are unaware of, and it'd be really interesting to be a fly on that wall. I hope you get some good information on that from your sources, both in Parliament and otherwise. David Krayden, great to see you. Thanks as always. Unbelievable that Canada continues to surprise us, and we'll see what happens with the Prime Minister. Will he resign? That's the question of the day. David, great to see you.
Thank you again, Clayton.
Always great. Thank you so much, David. Really, really appreciate it. And thank you guys so much for subscribing to the channel and being a part of our community here, supporting independent journalists like David. David does an amazing job in Canada, so thanks to him for his great reporting.
Hi, this is David Krayden from Krayden's Right and Stand on Guard. Join the resistance. Resolve to resist. Become a member of this station. I've been practicing journalism in one form or another for over 30 years. I've worked in print, radio, and television for a lot of prestigious publications and media outlets. I was an Armed Forces Public Affairs officer. I worked on Parliament Hill. I know how Ottawa works, and I know how corrupt federal government can be. But you can play a part in opposing Justin Trudeau's government and Justin Trudeau's plans for Canada. You can become a part of the Krayden's Right resistance. Now, I urge you today, please support this station in any way you can. Ring that bell, subscribe, because that ensures you're at least going to continue to be able to watch these episodes. You'll beat the algorithm. But more importantly, I need your financial support. I hate to ask, but that's what I'm doing. I made a decision to pursue independent media because I believed it was the best possible route for me to take as a journalist and as a concerned citizen of Canada. So you can become a part of that. And at only $5, you can become a part of that on YouTube, on Substack, and with Buy Me a Coffee, a one-time donation. But I need your support. And from the bottom of my heart, I thank you. If you've already done that, if you're already supporting the station, thank you. But if you haven't, make that decision today